The Gresham family dinners had always felt more like financial sparring matches than meals. The sprawling estate outside Napa Valley, complete with vineyard views and a private chef, was less a home and more a monument to status. As I settled into my usual seat near the fireplace, I prepared for another round of barely veiled jabs disguised as small talk. "Just bought a ski lodge in Aspen," Malcolm said, swirling his glass of Bordeaux like he'd just announced his candidacy for Senate. "Right next to that tech billionaire who practically owns half of Silicon Valley." Tessa, never one to be outdone, clicked her crystal glass against his. "We just closed on a boutique vineyard in Tuscany," she chimed, flipping her blonde hair over one shoulder. "Exclusive access to the med views you can't put a price on." I hid my smirk behind my glass of sparkling water. If only they knew. "Eve," Aunt Diana's voice cut through the hum of chatter. She had that sharp, precise tone that never failed to find its target. "You've been awfully quiet tonight." Malcolm leaned in, flashing his bleached smile. "We were just wondering about your living situation." And there it was. "What about it?" I asked, setting my glass down. I could feel the weight of their eyes, each of them eager for a hint of struggle to latch onto. "Still in that cramped loft downtown," he prodded, eyebrow raised. "The one with the brick facade, still renting right." Tessa's eyes lit up with mock surprise. "Oh, you mean that old building on Lincoln Avenue people still rent those?" I nearly laughed. The Lincoln Avenue complex was the first property I'd acquired under a discreet LLC. To them, I was just a struggling tenant scraping by in the shadows of their wealth. In reality, I owned the building outright and had quietly expanded my portfolio across half the city. "I like the space," I said, evenly swirling the water in my glass. "It has character." Malcolm smirked. "But don't you want something a bit, I don't know, real? You're 36, Eve. Time to buy something." I could have dropped the bomb right then. I could have told them that the building they sneered at, the one they assumed I merely rented, was mine. That my company, Northwood Capital, owned not just that structure, but several other commercial and residential properties, including the very estate we were dining in tonight. But where would be the fun in that? "I've managed just fine," I replied, leaning back into the plush leather chair. The fire crackled beside me, casting warm shadows that danced across their polished faces. "If you ever need advice," Malcolm continued, clearly enjoying the sound of his own voice, "I'd be happy to connect you with a decent financial advisor." "That's kind of you," I said, forcing a polite smile. "But I'm doing okay." Before they could press further, my father clinked his glass for attention, his silver hair catching the soft chandelier light. "All right, enough business talk," he said with a half-hearted chuckle. "Let's enjoy dinner." But as the courses came and went, I could feel their glances, each one silently tallying my perceived shortcomings. To them, I was the underachiever, the one who had somehow missed the memo on generational wealth. They had no idea that the letters announcing their lease renewals and rent increases would soon bear my signature. They had no idea that their supposed safety net had become a spider's web I controlled. As I picked at my dessert, Malcolm leaned in again. "Actually, Eve, you should know," he said with a tone of forced sympathy. "There's talk that the old Lincoln building is getting sold. Some investment firm swooped in and bought the whole block. Probably going to tear it all down for some high-rise." He paused, clearly hoping for a flicker of panic in my eyes. "Really?" I replied, keeping my face neutral. "Haven't heard anything." "Well, you should look into it," Tessa added with a tight, faux concerned smile. "It'd be a shame if you had to scramble for a new place." I leaned back, letting the fire's warmth seep into my bones. "Thanks for the heads up. I'll keep that in mind." I excused myself shortly after pulling my coat from the antique hall tree near the entrance. As I stepped outside into the crisp Napa air, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. The ink on my latest acquisition had barely dried, and they had no idea they were dining in a building I now owned. Their time atop the gilded pedestal was running out, and they were blissfully, wonderfully, utterly clueless. Sometimes the best revenge isn't in proving them wrong. It's in letting them realize far too late just how thoroughly they underestimated you. I stepped into my waiting car, the engine purring softly as I pulled away, leaving the Gresham Estate's grand facade shrinking in my rearview mirror. The game had just begun. The next morning, I woke to the soft, filtered light slipping through my loft windows. I stretched my muscles, still relaxed from the quiet satisfaction of last night's dinner. It was rare that I let myself indulge in the quiet thrill of holding a winning hand, but the Greshams had practically begged for it. They just didn't know it yet. I glanced at my phone, the screen glowing with notifications. My assistant, Mariah, had already sent over the morning briefing. Updates on our latest property acquisition, a few high-priority emails, and a reminder about the tenant meeting at the Lincoln Building. As I sipped my coffee, I scanned the latest market reports, smiling at the steady rise in property values across my portfolio. The Lincoln Avenue complex, the same one Malcolm had arrogantly dismissed, was thriving. The building's historic brickwork and spacious lofts were in high demand among artists, tech startups, and families looking for a slice of old city charm. I had no intention of bulldozing it, despite what Malcolm's smug grin suggested. Around noon, I stepped into the Lincoln Building's lobby, the familiar scent of aged wood and fresh paint wrapping around me. The renovation crews had done a stunning job preserving its character, and the tenants had taken notice. As I moved through the building, a few residents waved, calling out friendly greetings. They knew me as the quiet, hands-on owner who actually cared about the people living here. I reached the second floor where my property manager, Luis, was waiting. He straightened as I approached, his eyes bright. "Morning, Eve," he said, handing me a stack of tenant feedback forms. "The community board is excited about the new courtyard garden. They've been asking for more green space, and it's really coming together." "Perfect," I replied, flipping through the pages. "I want this place to feel like home, not just another block of concrete." As we walked the halls, I made notes on lighting upgrades and maintenance requests. My mind briefly wandered back to Malcolm's comment about the building being sold. The arrogance, the assumption that I had no control over my own living situation still grated on me. Just as we reached the lobby, my phone buzzed. It was Mariah calling from the main office. "Hey," I said, tucking the phone between my shoulder and ear as I signed off on a few maintenance forms. "Hey, just a heads up," she said, her tone a mix of excitement and caution. "You're going to want to check the financial reports from the Ashcroft estate. Something interesting just hit the wire." I paused. "Interesting how," "Well," she continued, the faint clatter of keyboards in the background. "It looks like someone's been playing fast and loose with the maintenance funds." I flagged a few invoices. Inflated costs, questionable contractor payments, the usual. But this time the numbers are significant. I felt a slow, familiar heat rise in my chest. That steady, simmering anticipation I always felt when pieces of a puzzle started to fall into place. "Send it all to me," I said, already making my way toward the exit. "I want every detail. This might be the leverage we've been waiting for." "On it," Mariah replied, a hint of a smile in her voice. "This is going to be fun." I ended the call, stepping out onto the busy sidewalk. The late morning sun bathed the brick facade in a warm, golden glow, and I allowed myself a rare, genuine smile. If the Greshams wanted a financial game, I'd happily play. After all, the boardroom was where I truly came alive. By the time I got back to my loft, Mariah had already sent over the files. I dropped my bag by the door, flicked on the industrial-style pendant light above my dining table, and opened my laptop. The spreadsheets she had attached loaded slowly, the numbers flickering into place like a slow drum roll. I leaned in, scrolling through the expenses for the Ashcroft estate. As I suspected, the maintenance funds were a mess. Overblown invoices, padded service fees, and bloated contracts with suppliers. It didn't take long to connect the dots. Malcolm's latest ski lodge purchase in Aspen and Tessa's vineyard in Tuscany hadn't been funded by their business savvy alone. They'd dipped deep into the estate's coffers, likely assuming no one would notice the creative accounting. I cracked my knuckles and smiled. They were right about one thing. This was going to be fun. The next morning, I called Mariah into my office. She arrived promptly, her dark curls pulled into a high ponytail, a takeout coffee in one hand, and a stack of fresh files in the other. "Morning, boss," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "You're going to love this." She spread the papers across my desk, tapping the first sheet. "Here's what I've found. The estate's maintenance fund has been used like a personal piggy bank for the past 3 years. Payments for roof repairs that were never done, landscaping contracts double the market rate, and my personal favorite, a $250 or $1,000 consulting fee, paid to a shell company that traces back to one of Malcolm's side ventures. I whistled low. Bold, even for them. Mariah leaned in, her eyes sparkling. And it gets better. Tessa's vineyard in Tuscany. She claimed it as a business expense for client entertainment, but the purchase records show the property was registered as a personal asset. No business, no clients, just a fancy summer home. I leaned back, fingers steepled as I processed the information. This was exactly what I needed. The Greshams had spent decades playing the game, but they'd gotten sloppy, and I had no intention of letting them off the hook. Okay, I said, tapping my pen against the edge of my desk. Here's the plan. I want a full audit. I want every questionable transaction, every suspicious invoice, and every conflict of interest flagged and organized. Build a timeline. Make it airtight. Mariah's grin widened. Consider it done. And for the record, I love this side of you. I smirked, watching her disappear into the hallway. I had always kept a low profile, preferring to let my properties speak for themselves. But this was personal. Later that afternoon, I took a walk through the Lincoln Building, my footsteps echoing against the polished hardwood floors. Residents chatted in the hallways, kids played in the courtyard, and the smell of freshly baked bread wafted from a nearby bakery. This was what I had built. A real community, not just another cold glass box in the skyline. As I made my way back to my loft, I felt my phone buzz. It was a message from my father. Dad, dinner this Sunday. Family business matters. Be there. I stared at the screen for a moment, my jaw tightening. They were circling the wagons, trying to regroup before the storm hit. They had no idea the real reckoning was already in motion. I slid the phone back into my pocket, my mind already mapping out my next steps. I would show up at that dinner, smile politely, and let them feel secure in their illusions. Because the thing about the Greshams, they never saw the quiet one coming. Sunday arrived with the kind of crisp, clear morning that made Napa Valley feel like a postcard. I pulled up to the estate, its towering gates and meticulously manicured hedges as imposing as ever. As I stepped out of my car, the smell of freshly cut grass and the distant clink of champagne glasses drifted over from the garden. The family had gathered early, their laughter carrying over the manicured lawn as if nothing in their world could ever go wrong. I straightened my blazer, smoothed my hair, and crossed the stone pathway to the entrance. Inside, the scene was exactly as I expected. Polished floors, crystal chandeliers, and walls lined with family portraits that conveniently left out the less glamorous branches of the Gresham tree. I paused at the doorway to the main hall, letting my gaze sweep over the crowd. Malcolm and Tessa were already holding court by the marble fireplace, each cradling a glass of something expensive. My father spotted me first, his gray eyes narrowing as he waved me over. "Evelyn," he said, his voice a touch too bright. "Good of you to make it." "Of course," I replied smoothly, stepping into the circle. "Wouldn't miss it." Malcolm's grin spread wide, his perfectly straight teeth on full display. "We were just discussing the recent real estate shakeups downtown. Heard your building on Lincoln might be up for redevelopment." I kept my face neutral, hiding the small thrill at his obliviousness. Oh, I hadn't heard. He leaned in, lowering his voice as if he were about to share some great insider secret. "Yeah, word is some new player's been buying up blocks of properties, trying to muscle in on old families like ours." "Is that so?" I replied, tilting my head in faux interest. "I guess we'll have to wait and see." Before he could press further, my father clinked his glass against the side of the marble mantel, calling for attention. The room fell silent as he took his place at the center, the family patriarch ready to address his subjects. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice carrying the weight of decades spent at the helm of the Gresham Empire. "I know we've had our share of challenges, but the family legacy remains strong, and I intend to keep it that way." I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall as he continued. This speech was nothing new. The same tired rhetoric about honor, tradition, and preserving the family name. He had no idea how much that name was about to change. As he droned on about market shifts and legacy projects, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. A quick glance revealed a message from Mariah. "Mariah, audit report is complete. Ready whenever you are." I slipped the phone back into my pocket, my pulse quickening. The trap was set, the pieces aligned, and all that remained was to spring it. As the dinner wore on, the conversation drifted back to real estate. Malcolm, emboldened by his second glass of wine, leaned over to me, his breath tinged with the sharp, oaky notes of his favorite vintage. "Eve, you should really think about diversifying," he said, swirling his glass. "Properties like that old loft of yours are risky investments. You never know when the market might turn." I met his gaze, letting a slow smile spread across my lips. "I appreciate the advice, Malcolm. I really do." Tessa chimed in, her diamond earrings catching the firelight. "It's just that we worry about you. You're not getting any younger, and you can't live in a rent-controlled building forever." I almost choked on my wine. Rent-controlled. If only they knew. I set my glass down, folding my hands in my lap as I leaned forward. "Actually, I've made a few investments of my own lately. Real estate, commercial properties, a few luxury high-rises. I've been busy." Malcolm's grin faltered, the faintest hint of confusion creasing his brow. "Oh," he said, his tone edging toward skepticism. "Where exactly?" I took a sip of my wine, letting the moment stretch just long enough to unsettle him. "Oh, you know, here and there. Some holdings in the city, a few properties on the outskirts, even a vineyard or two." Tessa's perfectly manicured hand froze mid-reach for the cheese plate. "You bought a vineyard," she echoed, her voice a touch sharper than before. I met her wide eyes, feeling the familiar thrill of the game. "Just a small one." I thought it might be a nice change of pace. "You know something real." The silence stretched between us, thick and electric, before my father cleared his throat, forcing a strained smile. "Well," he said, lifting his glass to family and success. I raised my glass in return, the crystal catching the firelight as I met each of their eyes in turn. To success, I echoed, my smile never wavering, and to the surprises still to come. As the toast echoed around the room, I felt a fierce, quiet satisfaction settle in my chest. They had no idea that the ground beneath their feet was already shifting, that the very walls they leaned on for comfort now had my name on the title deeds. They had no idea, but they would soon. The following Monday, I walked into my office, a sleek, sunlit space overlooking the heart of the city. The glass walls framed a skyline of polished steel and reflective glass, a fitting backdrop for the kind of quiet power moves I specialized in. Mariah was already there, tapping away at her keyboard, a fresh cup of coffee steaming beside her. She looked up as I entered, a glint of anticipation in her eyes. "Morning, Eve," she said, spinning her monitor around to face me. "I've organized the audit findings into 3 sections. Misappropriated funds, shell company transactions, and conflict of interest deals. It's quite the mess." I set my bag down, leaning over to scan the screen. She wasn't exaggerating. The numbers told a damning story. Millions siphoned off through inflated contracts, sweetheart deals, and outright fraud. Malcolm's Aspen Lodge, Tessa's vineyard, even the gaudy art installations in the family estate, all funded by the kind of creative accounting that would make a Wall Street banker blush. "Beautiful," I muttered, a slow smile spreading across my lips. "This is exactly what we needed." Mariah leaned in, her fingers tapping out a rapid staccato as she flipped through the documents. "I've already drafted the first wave of letters to the board members notifying them of the audit findings. We're framing it as a necessary step to ensure financial transparency and preserve the Gresham legacy." "Perfect," I said, my mind already racing through the next steps. "And the media contacts?" "Locked and loaded," she replied, leaning back with a satisfied grin. "We drop this at the right moment, and the fallout will hit them like a tidal wave." I met her eyes, the shared understanding passing between us like an unspoken pact. I had built my company, Northwood Capital, on the principle of transparency and ethical growth. The Greshams had built theirs on shadows and whispers. It was time to shine a light. 2 days later, I found myself back at the Ashcroft estate, my heels clicking against the polished marble floors as I followed the sound of voices drifting from the main hall. The family had gathered once more, this time for a hastily called board meeting. I paused just outside the doorway, listening as my father's deep, steady voice filled the room. "I've been informed that the new owner of the Lincoln Building is planning a major overhaul," he said, his tone carefully measured. This could disrupt our operations if we don't get ahead of it. I smiled, pushing open the heavy oak door and stepping inside. The room fell silent, every pair of eyes turning to me. Malcolm's smirk wavered, his fingers tightening around his wine glass. Tessa's expression flickered with something like nervousness, her manicured nails tapping an anxious rhythm against the arm of her chair. "Sorry, I'm late," I said, sliding into an empty seat near the head of the table. "I got caught up in a bit of property management." My father's eyes narrowed, the faintest hint of suspicion darkening his gaze. "Glad you could make it, Eve. We were just discussing some potential challenges on the real estate front." I leaned back, crossing my legs as I met his stare. "I heard something about a new player in town, right?" Malcolm forced a chuckle, though his eyes held a wary edge. "Yeah, some shadow company buying up blocks downtown. You know anything about that?" I let the silence stretch, enjoying the tension crackling through the air. "I might," I replied, picking up a glass of water from the table. "In fact, I'm pretty familiar with their work." My father's jaw tightened, a flicker of unease breaking through his carefully composed facade. "What do you mean?" he asked, his tone a touch too sharp. I leaned forward, setting my glass down with a quiet, deliberate clink. "I mean that I am the owner of Northwood Capital, the company that just acquired your precious Lincoln block and quite a few other properties around the city." The room erupted into a chorus of shocked murmurs, Tessa's wine glass slipping from her hand to shatter against the marble floor. Malcolm's face flushed, an alarming shade of crimson, his fists clenching as if he might launch himself across the table. You can't be serious," he spat, his voice strangled with disbelief. "Oh, I am," I said, locking eyes with him. "And it gets better. I've also just completed a full audit of the Ashcroft Estate's finances. The findings." I slid a thick, neatly bound stack of papers across the table. "Let's just say they make for some very interesting reading." My father's hand trembled as he reached for the file, his fingers whitening around the edges as he flipped through the damning pages. This is outrageous," he stammered, his voice barely more than a whisper. "You had no right." "I had every right," I cut in, my voice low and sharp. "You've bled this family dry for years, using the estate as your personal ATM, hiding behind a legacy you no longer deserve to carry." Malcolm pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. "You think you can just walk in here and take over?" I met his glare, feeling a fierce, quiet satisfaction settle in my chest. "I already have." For a long, stretched moment, the only sound was the quiet clink of ice settling in a nearby glass, the weight of years of secrets and whispered deals hanging thick in the air. I stood, brushing a stray thread from my sleeve. "I suggest you all take some time to read through those documents. It's a long list. Fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. Quite the family scrapbook." With that, I turned on my heel, my footsteps echoing down the marble hallway as I left them to unravel their carefully curated illusions. Outside, the sky had darkened, the first hints of a storm rolling in over the valley. I took a deep breath, letting the cool, damp air fill my lungs. Sometimes the most satisfying kind of revenge isn't in watching your enemies fall. It's in making sure they know exactly who pulled the rug out from under them. The days following that board meeting were a flurry of panicked phone calls, hastily arranged strategy sessions, and desperate attempts to contain the fallout. I could almost feel the chaos radiating from the estate as the Greshams scrambled to plug the gaping holes in their sinking ship. I kept my distance, letting the storm I had unleashed churn unchecked. It was a rare, satisfying kind of silence. The quiet that comes just before a building implodes. Then one morning, my phone buzzed with a call from my father. I watched it ring for a moment, my thumb hovering over the screen before finally swiping to answer. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low and strained, stripped of its usual commanding confidence. "We need to talk, face to face." I let a beat pass, enjoying the rare sound of uncertainty in his voice. "All right," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "My office. 1 hour." When he arrived, he looked smaller than I remembered. The usual sharp lines of his suit seemed to hang a little looser, the once proud tilt of his head now dipped with the weight of his own undoing. He stepped into my glass-walled corner office, eyes darting to the view of the city skyline stretching behind me as if realizing for the first time just how far I'd come. I gestured to the seat across from my desk, watching as he lowered himself into the leather chair, his movements slow-measured. He looked around the office. The polished concrete floors, the clean lines of the furniture, the framed contracts and blueprints lining the walls. His gaze lingered on the Northwood Capital logo etched into the glass door, his jaw tightening. "Nice place," he said, his voice rough. "Impressive." I leaned back, folding my hands. "Thank you. It took years to build. Unlike the house of cards you and your siblings have been playing with." His eyes flicked up to meet mine, a spark of the old fire flaring in his gaze. This thing you're doing, Eve, it's reckless. You're tearing the family apart." I felt a cold, quiet anger settle in my chest, each word sharpening in my mind like a blade. "No," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm saving what's left of this family. You're the ones who tore it apart, hiding behind a legacy you've been bleeding dry for decades." He flinched, the lines around his mouth deepening. "I can fix this," he said, leaning forward. His palms pressed flat against the edge of my desk. "We can fix this. Just tell me what you want." I met his desperate gaze, feeling the weight of 1,000 small betrayals. The dismissive glances, the whispered put-downs, the years of being underestimated, ignored, and quietly mocked. "I want control," I said, my voice cold final. "Full control. I want your shares. Malcolm's, Tessa's. Every piece of this empire you've clung to for so long." His eyes widened, a muscle in his jaw twitching. That's impossible. The family won't stand for it." "They don't have a choice," I shot back, leaning in until our faces were inches apart. "I own half the properties you rely on for cash flow. I control the board votes. I have the documents, the audits, the proof of every shady deal, every stolen dollar, every tax dodge. I can bring this entire empire crashing down with a single press release." His face paled, a fine sheen of sweat breaking out along his hairline. "You wouldn't," he whispered, his voice raw, trembling. I leaned back, a slow, satisfied smile spreading across my lips. "I already have." I reached into my desk drawer, pulling out a thick stack of papers bound with a crisp white ribbon. I dropped it onto the desk between us, the weight of it landing with a satisfying thud. "Sign this," I said, tapping the top of the stack. "Transfer your shares. Walk away quietly and I'll let you keep the estate. A small piece of what you once had. A relic for you to cling to." He stared at the papers, his face a mask of stunned disbelief, his hands trembling as they hovered above the stack. "And if I don't," he whispered, his eyes flicking up to meet mine, the faintest flicker of defiance still clinging to the edges of his gaze. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a cold, deadly whisper. "Then I burn it all to the ground." For a long, breathless moment, the only sound was the distant hum of traffic outside the glass walls, the soft, rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, his shoulders slumped, the last shreds of his defiance crumbling into ash. He reached for the pen, his fingers trembling as he scrawled his name across the dotted line, each stroke of ink a small final death of his legacy. When he finished, I reached across the desk, plucking the papers from his limp grip. I slid them back into the drawer, locking it with a quiet, deliberate click. "Thank you," I said, my voice calm, controlled. "I'll have my lawyer send over the final agreements. You'll be free to leave within the week." He pushed back from the desk, staggering to his feet, his face ashen, his shoulders hunched as if the weight of his choices had finally crushed the proud, unyielding man I had known my entire life. As he reached the door, he paused, his hand resting on the cool glass, his head bowed. "Evelyn," he whispered, his voice barely more than a ghost. I was wrong about you." I watched him go, my heart steady, my pulse calm, the fierce, quiet satisfaction of victory settling deep in my bones. "Yes," I whispered to the empty room as the door clicked shut behind him. "You were." I leaned back in my chair, the city skyline stretching out before me, the sun breaking through the morning fog in sharp golden rays. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just taking back what they stole. It's becoming exactly who they said you could never be. Story 2. Danielle Morse here. I'm 38 years old and I bought a dilapidated house in rural Pennsylvania with my last $900 last October. My family cut me off for it as if I were a disgrace. The ensuing stillness, however, was not the true anguish. It was coming to terms with the fact that their love was always contingent. I came to this realization. They are now phoning, messaging, and asking whether the property they used to make fun of has a spare room. But where on your porch are you listening before we reach that section traversing traffic? Leave a comment. The portion they thought I would never utter out is about to come. I pulled down a tiny road, my tires crackling over gravel covered with frost. Compared to the listed porch, the home was terrible. Ivy clinging to the siding like claws and broken windows. It was mine, though. A light snow started to fall, so I placed the car in park and looked through the glass. I didn't feel like I had won. Still, I felt abandoned. I exited the vehicle and took a folding chair from the trunk which I had previously utilized for writing poems during lunch breaks. I seated the chili piece at my boots and placed it on the freezing ground. But I was not going anywhere. Not now. I had attended my sister Marissa's birthday dinner a week prior. My folks talked endlessly about her planned Colorado healing getaway. $12,000 with no sense to take back her feminine authority. This is something she deserves. Mom eyed me and said, Dad then added Danielle. Didn't you promise to send the money? I said it bluntly, looking up from the overdone lasagna. It didn't. I purchased a home with the money. Forks stopped in midair. Marissa's munching ceased. My mom blinked slowly and icily, at which point they instructed me to depart. Excellent. Are you saying that you made a purchase? I purchased a home? It's mine, even though I mentioned it was a fixer-upper. Quiet. Next. Dad's voice was thundery, icy, and calm. You bought yourself with your savings. Marissa chuckled dryly. Instead of helping me reset, you purchased a dump. Danny, that's quite typical of you. I spoke in a steady tone. I never consented to pay for your vacation. Simply put, I didn't say no aloud. With a crisp clink, Mom put down her wine glass. It's obvious that you have chosen poverty. We won't help you maintain your illusions. Dad held out a hand as I opened my mouth. You can be totally autonomous if that's what you desire. I left the family group chat the next morning. No more birthday parties, no brunch invitations, and most definitely no Easter. As simple as that. The tap of a screen wiped 38 years of family history. I moved in the fold-up chair and returned to the present. Overhead, the bleak sky loomed large. No lightning, no thunder. Everything felt like it was coming to an end, that crushing pressure that never went away. My phone exploded. Mom sent me a fresh message. Don't attend Easter. No affection. Mom. I gazed at it. I moved my thumb over the delete icon. Then, as if folding away a piece of myself, I slid a phone into the pocket of my coat. I was no longer in need. With decaying timber, shattered glass, and ivy crawling up the exterior, the home towered over me. It was unsightly. It was deserted. It was mine, though. A representation of everything I shouldn't have. Liberty, command, a life according to my wishes. Do you know anything about families like mine? They stop acting as though they love you when you cease to be useful. I wasn't broken, though. Not quite yet. And I wasn't crawling back after coming this far. The wind increased, tugging at my coat as though it were attempting to rip away my last dignity. I remained sat for a while before getting up. I went over a partially decayed door, traversed the gravel, and entered the empty shell of what would one day be a house. The scent of cold decay and mildew slammed me inside. The ground creaked beneath my boots. I hadn't seen the seams in the pictures, but the air got through them. I took out the one curtain I had packed. Using a rusting step stool and a twisted rod, I attempted to hang a fading floral remnant from my first apartment in Philadelphia over a window. It fell to the ground with a thud. Normal. I rubbed my elbow on the wall and mumbled. I leaned back against the flaking paint as I sagged to the floor. Slow breathing, steady. Then suddenly a recollection struck. 16, my birthday. Mom pulled out a vibrant pink frosted cake from the shop. My name was spelled incorrectly. Danielle, happy birthday. Love. Marissa had assisted with the decor. They forgot my name again, even though it was intended to be pleasant. That year, she purchased a second-hand Jeep. I received a promise and paper plates covered with icing. Next year, perhaps. That had been the start. Or perhaps it was the first time I saw pictures of myself always off to the side. Signed group messages. I adore you, ladies. Only her name was highlighted, though. A vacation to Florida to which I was not invited. I was 28. You eventually stop assuming it's forgetfulness. You understand that it's a decision. I got up and cleaned myself up. I had shaking hands. Not from the cold, just from memory. They didn't yell. They simply silently removed me. Gently. As if I had never truly fit in. However, I remained here. And I had no intention of leaving. Only an unopened paint can and a carton of donated supplies. That was my only remaining resource. Perhaps they remembered me, I said as I looked at them. Perhaps they simply decided not to come visit me. Once more, my phone vibrated. For a moment, I prepared for Mom to take another icy swipe, one last digital erase. It wasn't her, though. Aunt Lydia was there. Hello, sweetheart. Warm and coarse like gravel beneath a rocking rocker, her voice crackled across the speaker. I simply wanted to say hello. Before she even said anything, I could hear her anxiety. I saw that you had left the family group chat. I gave a sour little laugh. Isn't that something that has been banished digitally? She hesitated. I need your attention in order to tell you something. The issue was never you. Simply put, Marissa, you weren't. Your only offense was that. I rested my head on the chilly refrigerator door. The pain is still there. Baby, I'm positive it does. Gently, she said. But pay attention. They will return when they need something. They always do. Remember how this felt, please. You dare not forget. The final line caused her voice to break. Not out of rage, from fatigue. She was correct, but I didn't realize it at the time. When they returned, they would demand more than just pardon. Outside, the wind had finally calmed down, like soot dusk filtered through the shattered kitchen window. With numb fingers and an even number heart, I was crouching on a broken stool attempting to repair a corroded latch. My phone buzzed once more at that point. Mom left one voicemail. Her name appears as a shadow on the screen without any preview. I remained still for some while. At last, I hit the play button. Danielle, my love. She had the same sweet, sugary voice she used when speaking to church women and at school fundraisers. So silky, so measured, so artificial. I've been thinking about you. I know things became tight, but you have to understand. Marissa has been under so much stress. Planning this retreat hasn't been simple. You know how sensitive she is. It was sensitive there. As if Marissa were composed of silk. I was also composed of sandpaper. I only wish you had taken into account how difficult this year has been for her. Although your timing is off, I know you mean well. It's always been a bit strange, actually. I could hear remorse hurtling toward me like a freight train. She admired you much. That's why she had such a strong reaction, you know. What about your dad? He stated something he didn't mean. He was wounded. Then the conclusion. You've always been the larger, stronger one. The muzzle was there once more. Dressed in a flattering manner. Act like the larger guy. Thus, they were never held responsible. That was the end of the voicemail. All we're doing is our best. Perhaps it's time to move on. I shut my eyes, allowing the quiet to descend like a layer of snow. Then I mentally recited what she had said. The larger person has always been you. It was not a praise. It was a tactic to keep me submissive, confined, and unnoticeable. During the relocation, I went to the plastic bin and threw away some mementos. I removed an old picture frame at the bottom. My graduation from college. Everybody was grinning. Marissa was in the spotlight holding up her camera so that my face was totally obscured. I would want a retake. They didn't ever do one. I'll include you in the edit. She chuckled. That picture was framed. I gazed at my shoulder, which was just barely visible in the corner. I then flipped it over. I had not left to chastise anyone. I didn't keep quiet out of animosity. I left because I was being drowned by the commotion, the acting, and the performative love. Applause was not what I wanted. I desired tranquility in an environment where I wouldn't have to shrink to blend in, even though it had broken windows and mildew and cost $900. I owned it. For the first time, too. I was, too. Remember to subscribe if you were moved by this story. For what happens if Danielle's past suddenly becomes apparent? For that, you should be present. I picked up a pen and wrote one sentence on a piece of yellow sticky paper. I'm not like this. Like closing a book? I placed it face down on the counter and slapped it on the back of the picture frame. My phone buzzed once more after I refused to start. Mom left a voicemail. This time I didn't pay attention. The choreography was already familiar to me. The sugar-coated outreach comes first. The twist came after you took a step forward. Snug around your throat until your voice disappears once more. The phone was thrown onto the windowsill. Allow the cool air to permeate the musty kitchen by opening the frame as far as the broken latch would permit. Peace was not what they desired. They desired obedience. The knocking began a week later. It was early. The porch boards were still wet with morning dew, and the sun had not yet risen over the trees. I initially believed it to be the wind striking a loose shutter once more. However, it returned. 3 stubby raps. When I peered through the frayed curtain, my heart wasn't immediately broken. In wet cement, it sank like a stone. Naturally, Marissa. She was standing there tapping impatiently against the concrete with one stiletto heel. Her oversized spectacles and tight-fitting white cashmere trench coat reflected my deserted street like a futuristic surveillance drone, even remaining still. She looked like she was on the cover of Subtle Condescension Monthly. She didn't wait for me to open the door. Instead, she turned, projecting her voice toward a neighbor strolling a golden dog. Mom claims she's gone. Full mountain hermit, she remarked, voice syrupy with feigned sympathy. But hey, some folks need their rebellions, right? I opened the door just as she turned back. Well, there she is, the proud homeowner, she said, stretching the word like bubblegum. Honestly, this neighborhood's truly gone downhill. Do you get raccoons here? She said, peering toward my unkempt grass. I folded my arms, resting on the doorframe. Is that why you're here? Are you currently conducting wildlife surveys? She grinned. Danny, don't be defensive. I simply wanted to check in. You fell off the radar. What do you mean by telling them that I had become a swamp witch? Yes, it felt healthy to keep a little space. She glanced about, evaluating the drooping gutters and damaged railings. This place has character, probably mold and a smell behind me, she added, squeezing the porch pillars as if it were infectious. One of the joggers waved. She smiled and waved back. Please don't mind us. Just a little sisterly camaraderie. Then she became quiet. The HOA has been sniffing around, listen. The location might not be up to code, someone said. Did you report me? I inquired. She didn't dispute it. Danielle, there are norms in this field. Individuals converse. I didn't blink as I focused on her. As usual, she turned. With a theatrical sigh, she acknowledged, I'm in a bit of a bind. At the retreat's spa wing, 3 sound bath sessions had to be canceled due to a pipe rupture incident. Complete chaos. Since I remained silent, I reasoned that I could be allowed to stay for a night or 2. She knocked on the door, as if she thought it might fall apart. Anywhere is acceptable, even in this place, as though it were a tent, as if she had nothing to conceal. I was psychologically spinning in a hoarder's cabin, you told Mom. That's not how I said it, she mumbled as she became enthralled by a piece of paint. I was simply concerned. And take a look at yourself. You're making it through. Are you still doing that? What is the name for it? In character, Grant whispered it. One evening, I moved aside. Avoid touching anything. She glowed as if I had proposed a luxury suite to her. You are the greatest. You were always. People walk all over you because of this. Then, like royalty slumming it, she dashed by me, her heels clicking on crumbling floors. Long after she was gone, I remained at the door gazing at her path as if it were on fire. She needed assistance, but not in the way she was requesting it. When I woke up the following morning, I smelled something worse than instant coffee. Not happy, not warm, the sort that is sharp, the sort that makes fun of others. I wore a sweatshirt over my tank top and entered the hallway barefoot. The pulse is already increasing. She was smiling, snarling, and protecting something at my kitchen table. The floor underneath me seemed to be attempting to warn me because it knew what I was going to witness. I froze when I turned the corner into the kitchen. A ring of light was standing by the drafty window, illuminating my chipped countertops with its icy, sterile halo. Granola bars, a lavender candle I'd never owned, and neatly arranged oat milk cartons had taken the place of my dented kettle. And in the midst of everything, or take a chance. She had on a full makeup look, her lips were glossy, her hair was perfectly curled, and she was grinning sweetly into her phone as if she were hosting Good Morning America. This wasn't a studio, though. My kitchen looked like this. I'm alive? Hello, my angels, she interrupted her live broadcast. Today we are engaged in a truly significant endeavor. My sister, bless her, has been living there, and I wanted to show you all where she lives. She panned over the mismatched chairs I bought at a salvage auction, the sagging floor and the broken tile. It's a little bit of a fixer, she said with a smile. However, we adore change, don't we? She also kicked the damaged refrigerator. Since Y2K, this baby hasn't worked. A high-pitched chuckle. It's causing generational pain, to be honest. I could hear the chimes of comments coming in from the other side of the room. God, oh God, she read out loud. A person recently inquired as to if this was a shelter. No, sweetie, it's my sister's house, she added after laughing once again. It's sad I realized that. I moved forward without a word. She took a while to notice me. There was another remark. Is that your sister, really? She has a squatter's appearance. Marissa shifted the phone gently in my direction without skipping a beat. Yes, she grinned as she spoke. That includes her slippers. Something inside of me finally exploded, and it's giving me Great Depression chic. Calmly, I approached and tore the phone off the tripod. Her shriek was overpowered by the sound of the suction cup detaching, which reverberated throughout the room. What are you doing, hello? She let out a cry. I fixed my gaze on her level. Do you want content? This is your headline. Leave before I tell them the truth. I kept her phone out of her grasp as she grabbed for it. You have no right to use my life as a weapon only to earn likes. No more. The change was immediate. Voice shaking, eyes glistening, the victim mask slipping on like a second skin. She muttered, I was just trying to help. I believed that donations were possible. It was for you. You made fun of me. You turned my suffering into a show. You made a joke out of my house. I returned the phone as if it were tainted. Now you may leave. She took a whiff, picked up her beauty bag and pocketbook, and stopped at the doorway. Only long enough to entertain her invisible audience. I get this. Loud and breathy, she said, for making an effort to be a decent sister. Behind her, the door slammed. There was a slight buzz from the ring light. With trembling hands, I slumped back against the wall. Not in terror, but in rage and liberty. They were no longer allowed to recount my life. The storm had passed before evening. With a cracked mug in hand, I cuddled up on the ancient couch. Coffee is bitter and dark. Outside, the twilight enveloped the hills. My phone thumped like a heartbeat within. Notifications are going crazy. Even though I hadn't posted anything, I was all over the place. I froze when I opened Instagram. My sister was able to reconstruct my face through a GoFundMe effort. Sweaty in the middle, carrying a trash bag. I'm cuddled up under Aunt Lydia's quilt in another picture. My young sister has endured a great deal. Assist me in giving her the life she merits. $18 or $340 was raised. Marissa Valley is the recipient's withdrawal account. PayPal is Marissa's company. I froze. Leaving the toxicity behind the softly filtered footage of her driving off, I scribbled another post. Background piano music. I got to my feet and paced the little living room like a confined animal. I gripped the phone tightly. Comments were pouring in. "You're an angel. There should be more sisters like you in the world." I sent $50. I hope she is able to recover. My cup hit the table with a smack. It broke. She had made money off of me. My battle, my dignity, and the fact that I had remained silent. No warning, no call, not even an SMS message. I read our most recent texts. Nothing. I made an effort to cover the campaign. The platform answered. Our community rules are not broken by this campaign. Naturally, it didn't, because Marissa was an expert at manipulating the system. I also had no intention of letting her win. Put it in the ideal frame. Just enough to say, let others do the rest. Marissa always did it that way. Just now, a brand new tale became online. There are others who simply wish to remain angry. I'm doing my best. Haters will hate. I scrolled back to the image after staring at the words until they became blurry. The one where I was hauling trash bags across chipped concrete while squatting on the porch in my old slippers. She had chuckled. Great Depression style. The mountain air made the door groan. It was silent inside. Too silent. Felt as though a ghost was pursuing the life I had created. A notice then appeared on my screen. Legal_LLC_co. Sent a message request. I came upon the GoFundMe. That wasn't authorized by you, was it? I blinked. I work as a paralegal. Colorado Bar certification. In light of the way the money was presented, this appears to be civil exploitation, maybe wire fraud. Do you want to discuss receipts? I took a leisurely seat. My race and heart had analyzed the message, and their eyes were fixed on it. It was noticed by another person. Not only the derision, but the tactic as well. The way Marissa created a story and spread it like charity-flavored candy. I typed a single word. Indeed, she answered right away. Cool. Start by recording your screen. Record timestamps. Don't yet confront her in public. Believe me. I sensed the glimmer of something that had been absent for weeks. Strength. A tidal wave. No, only a pilot light. It was mine, though. After setting my phone to Do Not Disturb, I started working. Recording planning, taking screenshots, and recording every swipe, smile, and cash. Not just to protect myself, but also to ruin the scheme she had devised using me as the bait. The house seemed clean the morning before Marissa's large healing stream live broadcast. As I sat at the kitchen table, mountain air blew through the broken windows. Laptop lighting, phone buzzing. I was pacing the kitchen 2 weeks ago. I was prepared now. Elsie's face became radiant. My cardio consists of a Zoom framed by strewn legal pads in the final half-inch of coffee in a cup that reads contracts. The final stop and desist letter was examined by us. Even as her intellect faltered, her voice remained calm. "Danielle, take a breath," she murmured softly. "Now the documents speak for themselves." As the clock ticked down to Marissa's live stream, the unvarnished, uncut reveal she had been building for days, I leaned back and watched. Since the GoFundMe windfall, this was her first significant public action. If it hadn't been so deliberate, it would have been absurd. Elsie's courier confirmed that her transmission went live 10 minutes prior. The packet arrived precisely as scheduled. The screen wavered. She was there. Marissa Vale is surrounded by salt lamps and houseplants and is drenched in soothing lighting. Like truth itself, her hair curled. "Hello, lovely souls," she remarked in a smooth voice. "I appreciate you being here today. We're all about optimism, but I am aware that there has been some noise. I observed in silence as she explained that she was only attempting to assist as always. How some individuals react to the fact that it happened halfway through with grief rather than appreciation. A query concerning loyalty to one's family. A visibly anxious worker with a manila packet in hand entered the picture. Like fireworks, live discussion erupted. "What's there?" She seemed to be really upset. "Oh my God, what's happening?" Marissa quickly blinked as she accepted the package. It included a brief, succinct, and scathing letter. Her hand shook. She took one look at the camera and then looked away. Normally, calm background music looped uncomfortably. Off mic, she muttered something. The live broadcast then abruptly stopped. No farewells, no final affirmation. Static only. I let out a slow breath. Don't yell, no show. Just a quick, accurate reset. Reddit posts became viral in a matter of minutes. A live cease and desist. On camera, she was lawfully bodied. Screenshots or nothing occurred. Her frozen visage was captured in viral video. Lawful. The investigation into the wire fraud aspect began on Twitter. The contribution path was broken down by TikTokers. Every path leads to her PayPal account. Then from @OHULO_president_Skyline Estate came another ping message. "Hello, Danielle. We had no idea that Marissa Vale was soliciting money under the guise of the Skyline Estate. Please be aware that her behavior is being examined internally." This time, instead of merely surviving her narrative, I was rewriting it, which makes me grin for the first time in days. Our emergency help regulations and code of ethics are broken by this deception. We would appreciate your assistance while we begin a formal assessment. That was the first line of Skyline Estate's email. Where was it patched PDFs? With shaking fingers, I opened them. It was a calm rage, not fear. Accumulating like a wave. They were there. Use. Marissa's submissions to various grant and housing programs were filled with exaggerated claims and half-truths. In her financial appeals, she had transformed my name address and my challenges into bullet points. She had not just deceived me. Programs designed to assist folks like me were cheated by her. However, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks in place of terror. Clara. They wanted the damaged sister to be me. The sad setting for her comeback, the cautionary story. I wasn't made for sympathy, though. I was made to be resilient. I carefully shut off my laptop. It was more like sealing a case file than ending a battle. I wasn't the one who had to explain this time. The trip to Los Angeles seemed to take longer than it actually did. The late afternoon sun shimmered on the road. Although my blue dress didn't shimmer, it fit well. The ancient silver locket that my mother used to make fun of, calling it garbage from the flea market, hung around my neck. It felt like armor tonight. I looked at the large banners flanking the hotel as I got out of the car and gave the valet the keys. One heart at a time, Marissa Vale offers healing families. A lower lady could have been brought down by the irony. I entered the Marriott Grand Ballroom with my shoulders straight. The audience hummed inside. Journalists, wellness enthusiasts, and influencers are all looking for ideal lighting and photo opportunities. And Marissa was there, the main stage. Under the bright beams, her skin glowed. She was hugged like approval itself by a glittering champagne dress. Her chuckle sounded as if it had been practiced. I wasn't here to make a scene, though. I came to see the reality. Makeup lost time. I sat down close to the rear. Invisible, but vigilant. She drifted from one group to another. She is blessing everyone with her carefully chosen charm. The slideshow started. Kids grinning generic letters of gratitude, soft clapping grainy rehab stock film, courteous nods. Then it took place. A flicker. She did not take the following slide. A text message in a large typeface was presented. Leave her in that dump to rot. For PR, I provided them with the GoFundMe link. Baby cry for me. Shocks. Phones went up. The muttering became louder. One more slide. She's skilled at winning people over. Maintain low camera angles, display the fissures. Then mayhem. The letter, air rot, seeps out. Fake healing was revealed by Marissa. Across live broadcasts, hashtags grew like weeds. Turning Marissa caught a glimpse of the TV. And I saw it for the first time in my life. A complete collapse, not just a crack. She blinked, stammered. Technical error. I'm sorry, but nobody was interested. Not this evening. Imogene then stepped in front of them. She was supposed to talk about how resilient Marissa is. Rather, she quietly made her way up the stage. She avoided glancing at Marissa. She glanced at the others. I was asked to speak tonight about hope, she said, her voice ringing out strongly as she talked about family and restoring trust. Her voice thickened as she stopped. But this family has been hiding behind a mask for far too long. We have supported one daughter while stifling the other, and we have chastised one while grinning in public. Tears moved. They put down the drinks. I will no longer pretend. Which pictures don't strike out to me tonight? Okay, what is true is what I stand for. Without hesitation, she moved across the room and gave me a firm embrace. The sort that was camera-free. Still cameras were clicking, though I didn't see 4 inches phones buzzed. Marissa ran away, and I didn't follow her. Like poetic justice, the gown catches on a chair leg and the heels click. I didn't even see her go away. Aunt Imogene simply held me. I then let the quiet to end. For me, not for her. A few others applauded. A few stood. Others only gazed. And I remained still. As a woman, not as a symbol. I refused to be written out anymore. I inhaled the quiet. It suddenly spoke for me after all these years of living within, and in some way it was louder than Marissa's carefully manicured world had ever dared to be. My small house's patched windows let in morning sunshine. Warm rectangles are cast onto the floor. Through the open window came the smell of freshly painted walls and freshly mowed lawns. No more mildew, no more wet shadows, only light. After pulling a cardigan over my pajamas, I padded into the kitchen barefoot. My feet feel cold on the freshly sanded wood floor. Outside, I could hear the high-pitched laughing of neighborhood children doing chalk drawings on the pavement while the coffee maker hissed softly, unedited and unfiltered. I let the silence descend upon me as I took a sip from my mug, whole not empty. 1 month had passed since the gala when Marissa's mask broke in front of sponsors, photographers, and the never-forgetting viral machine. There were never any excuses. They didn't have to, though. I was no longer anticipating their arrival. Since then, I had been rebuilding. I'm bored. Bored. Not only the property, but also my self-esteem. I was once told I didn't deserve this existence. Had begun to form in my own hands. A minor cleanup action was arranged by the community that Saturday. As I laid out a folding table with brownies and lemonade, I observed people coming and going, exchanging secrets, providing tools, cutting branches, and smiling and laughing. Outside my porch, children drew happy chalk notes. You are important, more powerful than you realize. Greetings from home. I was wiping down the table in the early afternoon sun when it gave me a real smile without looking over my shoulder. It buzzed on my phone. Something urged me to check, but I nearly disregarded it. Marissa had left a message. Hey, it's been difficult. Would it be possible for us to crash with you for a while? Only until we work things out. No acknowledgement, no apology, only a presumption. I spent a long time looking at the screen. It was time for the woman who had called my house a junkyard shack to have a roof. I carefully placed the phone next to the pitcher of lemonade. I refrained from venting. I didn't write a nasty response. I simply entered. Light on my feet. I felt lighter than I have in a long time. A plain wooden frame stood over the coat rack in the foyer. There was a fading picture within. After a school performance, I was 8 years old and stiff in a glittery paper crown. Aunt Imogene was standing in the background, somewhat fuzzy, but definitely there, clapping as if she thought every word I had ever spoken was true. In clean cursive beneath the picture, "The light was always with you." A knot in my throat rises and then subsides when I lightly touch the glass. Gratitude is not tears, just tranquility. I grabbed my phone and wrote the only thing that seemed accurate. "Lies have no place here anymore. Peace be with you." I also sent it outside. On the sidewalk, a youngster sketched a shaky golden sun while laughing. I no longer had to worry about this house, which I had purchased for $9,000. It served as my base. I had been pleading for a seat at a table that was never intended for me for so long. Bending, shrinking, acting, just to get love according to someone else's standards. No more. I had previously constructed a door, but they wanted a key, and a life that no one could take away lay behind it. The individuals who were meant to love us the most sometimes erect the hardest barriers for us to overcome. However, you discover yourself as well as independence when you stop knocking and construct your own entry. How about you? Have you ever had to decide between family and peace? Tell your tale in the space provided here. I read every comment, and please remember to subscribe for more if you enjoy strong real-life family drama tales like this one. Here your voice counts.